Hello, it's Brenda Wissinger again. So, today in this edition, we are going to talk about a just transition. I was going to put all the climate justice stuff all into one thing, but it didn't work out that way. The list of policies for that is 27 pages long, and that's not going to work, of course. So, I just did a just transition. So, we're going to talk about how to provide a just transition for workers on, yeah. We're going to also do native justice, addressing environmental justice and environmental racism, and addressing frontline climate justice, and building a more just world so our world is more resilient to the impacts of climate change. We're going to get into that, but today we're just doing a just transition. Also, I'm going to go into the next episode I'm going to do is going to be on housing and buildings, and the one after that is going to be on finance. The finances and that type of thing, taxes, carbon taxes, or carbon pricing, cap and trade, divesting, that sort of stuff. I'm also going to do one on the Green New Deal itself, and just a brief overview. I'm also going to do one on considering everything coronavirus and Trump going on. I'm going to point out that the things that Trump has done wrong with coronavirus and the absolute stupidity his administration has shown us in trying to act on this. And I'm going to give a list of things that Trump has done wrong overall. So that's going to be a long one. So, first, for just transition. So, the first things first, a GI Bill for fossil fuel employees. So we need to create a new agency, the Center for Employment Continuity and Economic Adjustment. Basically, its job is, or one of the things behind it, is to record to create a database of every fossil fuel employee, and so they're able to provide them with aid quickly and efficiently, and make sure that aid's given immediately. So then another part is housing vouchers. So dedicate 15 billion, maybe a little more, to housing vouchers. Also, per year, a black lung disability fund as well. So that would be 7.5 to 15 billion one-time deal. Just pay that. So because coal companies cannot pay that, or sometimes, or not that they can't, but will not pay that anymore. A federal transition indirect employment program. So, a federal program to employ fossil fuel employees in different areas, but through the federal government, but they'll work for somebody else. So that's 10, 15 billion. Job continuity technical and skills training program. So that's also about 10 billion, is basically to provide training for former fossil fuel employees to go into other jobs. Fossil fuel employee retirement assistance program, which is $7 billion to enable them to retire. A former fossil fuel employee college assistance program, that's $5 billion to help them go to college. Coal belt and fossil fuel area redevelopment corridors. So that's 1 to 8 billion, basically an economic area with lower corporate tax rates and lax regulations to provide more economic development in those areas. In more services. GI Bill for impacted workers in coal and community reinvestment, providing impacted workers, their families, their communities with financial security by restoring up retirement benefits through federal backstops to our troubled pension system to safeguard a lifetime of deferred wages for retirees. And work to do that, work with Pension Benefits Guarantee Corporation, labor unions to stabilize the retirement system, and provide for the deficit in the Pension Benefits Guarantee Corporation of $53.9 billion. Granting qualifying employees and their families continued access to historic health insurance coverage. I'm not exactly sure what I mean by historic, but at any rate, and this also goes back to expanding healthcare coverage. That's actually a climate policy. Anything could be a climate policy as long as it makes the world more resilient. Providing income support and educational training stipends for all workers seeking to move into new related professions. All employees and contractors of companies directly involved in extraction and processing of fossil fuels will be eligible for the program. These can be run through local unions, and ensuring eligibility for all employees and contractors of companies directly involved in extraction and processing of fossil fuels. And working with unions to provide just transition. Support workers as they find future employment. Creating a community repower fund to invest in communities impacted by the changes in fossil fuel industries. These investments will support bottom-up, locally driven economic and workforce development strategies, subsidize and incentivize economic diversification, redevelopment corridors, which I basically just said, including manufacturing, clean energy business and growth, infrastructure and supplements, and any foregone local tax revenue. And use the existing skills of workers to work with that. So, establishing a dedicated restoration fund to create new skilled union jobs in environmental reconstruction. Fossil fuel companies will help accountable for the pay for the environmental, health, and community damages caused by coal, oil, gas extraction by supporting a comprehensive reclamation program through the for the restoration fund. The program will hire local workers for reclamation and restoration projects in areas where mining, drilling, and fracking have damaged natural resources, harmed water tables, and polluted fields. So that's another thing to provide that. So those are the main things there. Providing for health insurance coverage, expanding health insurance coverage, and other formats too. And just providing retirement, providing that sort of thing. Furthering economic development for fossil fuels communities, former fossil fuels communities. So one of these things, so there are some things that the natural resources of these areas can actually be used for. At least one of them is going to be temporary. Hydrogen is temporary. I look at hydrogen as a transition fuel. Hydrogen shouldn't be permanent because most of it comes from fossil fuel resources, and it's an extremely inefficient way to get energy. So start with a hydrogen grant program to start a hydrogen industry in those areas. This can provide for for shipping. It can provide energy for that. It can provide energy for airlines. It can provide energy for other areas of the economy that, you know, that sort of thing. Carbon capture and sequestration. That's another thing that can be used for these areas because they have areas that they can put the stuff. But it has to be careful, and these have to be well regulated. You have to make sure every well and everything that's capped off, every place it could leak is secure, and that's going to be a heavy, big, giant job. Um, so, and then lubricants is something else that fossil fuel industry could still exist because of. Otherwise, or lubricants and maybe a little bit of plastics, but otherwise it's not going to exist anymore. It has to go bye bye. Fossil fuels has to go bye bye. So grants and loans. Former fossil fuel under the hydrogen grant program is $5 billion, and the carbon capture and sequestration grant is $14 billion. Grants and loans. Former fossil fuel town economic development grant, which is between $5 and $20 billion. The Smart Growth Grant, which is something that already exists. I don't know if it still exists under the Trump administration. I'd have to check. It's through the EPA. Using employment continuity. Fossil fuel infrastructure repair, dismantle, convert on public lands. $200 million to $3 billion. Restoration and reclamation of fossil fuel. Well, I already said that. Restoration program fund, $5 to $7 billion. Coal belt and fossil fuel redevelopment corridors. Already said that. Fossil fuel community member assistance program, $13.25 billion. Because when the fossil fuel drop out, fossil fuel employees won't be the only ones hurting. There'll be other community members as well because they support those people, and so you have to have some program to help them as well. But the Green New Deal will provide more jobs and will provide more jobs than it will lose. The only problem is in some areas there might be a discrepancy. There might lose some jobs in some areas, very fossil fuel oriented areas that have low amounts of renewable energy and that sort of thing. They might lose jobs because of it. So we want to make sure that they're able to still survive. So economic development for Rust Belt or urban poor and rural communities. Manufacturing industry. Rural and Rust Belt manufacturing program, $2 to $8 billion dedicated to trying to promote those areas. Advanced technology manufacturing program, $1 to $3 billion. Rust Belt, urban poor, and rural development or rural redevelopment corridors. Excuse me. Same thing behind the coal belt and fossil fuel industry corridors. A grant to help poor communities with $10 billion being invested in that. Prioritizing small farmers over industrial agriculture. Go see my agriculture edition. The move to decarbonization all told. So we'll have there's hundreds of infrastructure programs, climate related programs. So there's reinvestment or rebuilding the grid. So there's rebuilding the grid. There's building more renewable energy. There's grid storage. There's building high-speed rail, expanding public transportation. All of this stuff, building a regenerative agriculture, and all of these different things will increase the amount of people employed. Building a better housing system, or a more efficient housing system, and that sort of thing. Adaptation programs, all of this, building dikes, levees, and that sort of thing. Building a better water storage and water or flood control system. All of these things will improve upon, will create more jobs, and not just jobs that are temporary, but permanent jobs. So that's an important thing. And then there's also reinvestment with different programs involved, with climate justice programs and other programs that are involved with this, that hopefully we can put at the same time, that will reinvest in our economy and reinvigorate our economy in that way as well. Infrastructure does a really good job doing that, but other programs do it as well too, like healthcare. So one of the specific programs is a National Climate Corps, and within that there's a National Climate Infrastructure Corps, a Civilian Conservation Corps, a Global Climate Service Corps, and Green Careers Network. So basically, the National Climate Infrastructure Corps focused on energy, housing, transportation, adaptation, things to solve those areas. The Civilian Conservation Corps focused on natural resources and that sort of thing, and building up those, helping that out, parks, or public lands and other areas, wildlife adaptation, and other things. The Global Climate Service Corps helps mitigate, helps other countries adapt and mitigate climate change in their own countries. And the Green Careers Network helps people find jobs in green energy or climate-related jobs. A federal jobs guarantee, and this is actually one of the rights that, this is in the Green New Deal, and this has a lot of debate, but this is one of the rights that was proposed in Franklin Roosevelt's Second Bill of Rights, to have a job. So it's not as radical as it seems, and I mean, how are you going to function in society if you don't have a job anyways? And what harm would it do what harm would it do to try to meet this goal? If you're not able to meet it, that's one thing. Or that you're not able to meet it, what harm is going to be in it? Other than being sued, the federal government being sued, and usually, or the federal government being sued, there's probably not much of a threat there. So, education and skills training for careers in a clean energy future, funding for STEM, climate, sustainability education, career pathways, student loan debt forgiveness, education employer partners throughout K-12 and community colleges, universities, and throughout higher education, trade schools as well, and with particular emphasis on historically black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, tribal colleges and universities, and other minority serving institutions. Ensuring the coordination of federal agency resources to link the growth of clean energy sectors to investments in job training, job placement, strong career ladders to allow for professional advancement in partnership with America's labor unions, strengthening school-to-work pipelines through greater support and promotion of registered apprenticeships, technical and skill certification programs, and community and technical colleges, and establishing dedicated programs for green and industrial and construction job training and placement under the Worker Innovation and Opportunity Act, partnering with union experts and federally funded workforce providers to create labor management management training certificate programs that improve worker safety, expand worker skills, and allow for project opportunities for workers to join unions. Yeah, linking apprenticeships with our investments in clean energy and climate infrastructure, supporting clean energy education and workforce training programs for previously disenfranchised persons to gain access to good paying jobs in a new energy economy. And yeah. And then the next section is economic installation. Provide for problems that might arise at that. So an increase in food stamps, creating a universal clean energy service fund, and HUD energy assistance, and expanding HUD energy assistance. Using the Universal Clean Energy Service Fund to reduce monthly electricity costs for qualifying families and to assure every American has access to affordable and climate pollution free electricity. Integrating the Universal Clean Energy Service Fund with federal low income or with LIHEAP and the current which is the main program to help low income families pay their energy bills. Um, and expanding LIHEAP and it's making sure that it prioritizes electrification rather than oil and that sort of thing. So pushing for electrification and those type of programs with that, and retrofitting with them in place. Partnering with existing state programs, working with states, non-profit organizations, and utilities to promote the enrollment in the Universal Clean Energy Service Fund and to enable community ownership of the clean distributed energy system such as community solar and to deliver the full benefits, and for co-ops, for example, rural co-ops, full benefits of a clean energy to low-income renters. Directing HUD to develop utility and disbursements incentives and calculations for rental assistance funding that provide strong incentives for affordable housing developers and public housing authorities to pursue strong energy efficiency and climate energy measures while overcoming split incentives from the federal recapture of locally achieved energy savings at the property level. And this will modernize affordable housing by rationalizing incentives for building owners and property owners to invest in cost-saving building retrofits and improve living conditions, energy uses, and environmental impact of buildings, and permanently lowering bills for tenants and homeowners. Empowering local authority and local action. Supporting local action against pollution and fossil fuels. Supporting local jurisdictions in enacting bans on new gas infrastructure in buildings with technical assistance and new federal incentives. This will accelerate the transition to zero carbon buildings at scale and speed required to reach 100% new buildings in the coming decade. So that's an important thing because we really need to electrify quickly. We need to do that even more quickly than we need to get to 100% clean energy. We need to do that quickly than we need to get clean cars. So it's important. Working with Congress to pass legislation to power local governments to ban the use of federal eminent domain for fossil fuel infrastructure projects or the consumption of specific fossil fuel products such as high carbon transportation fuels in their jurisdictions and offer federal technical assistance for the development and implementation of such policies. Partnering and incentivizing local jurisdictions to achieve early retirement of coal-fired power plants, and reversing Trump administration's acts, including the Clean Water Act, or including actions against the Clean Water Act that undermine state and local authority to reject fossil fuel infrastructure projects. Another thing is making it easier for local communities to go up against fossil fuels in court. So that's another area, making sure that nothing is passed. Also, that removes that right for them to be able to do that and do climate litigation. Ensuring good jobs and families, supporting wages and benefits. Giving a right to organize and collectively bargain. Repealing provisions of the federal Taft-Hartley Act that permits so-called right to work laws in states, which result in lower wages for working living in states that have them relative to their counterparts in non-right to work law states, limiting workers' rights to collectively bargain and protect themselves from predatory employees that are purposely designed to hurt union membership. Eliminating these laws will ensure that everybody who benefits from a union representation pays their fair share of that representation. Expanding unions organizing by amending the National Labor Relations Act to recognize the establishment of represented collective bargaining unit when a majority of workers vote to form a union, or a majority of workers sign authorization cards to join a union, and to set standards for swiftly establishing the first contracts between employers and bargaining units. So, using collective bargaining was probably the best way to do labor. Incentivizing municipalities to co-enforce labor laws and standards, such as waive laws, by enacting labor unions and community organizations for that purpose. Robustly protecting the rights of workers when employees break existing labor law by discouraging and preventing workers from collectively bargaining or discouraging laws that prevent workers from collectively bargaining, or and prevent employers from otherwise retaliating against workers. Through swift and consistent enforcement of federal law, force changes in corporate behavior to give worker organizing efforts the opportunity to succeed. This will include increasing fines on illegal corporate activity, broadening strike rights, and giving workers a private right of action when their when their rights are violated, and expanding misclassification and joint employer protections, protecting the Right to Organize Act proposed by Representative Bobby Scott and Patty Murray and Sharon Brown, provides a detailed roadmap for the specific actions needed. Giving workers and employees a fair share, predictable, and timely adjudication of cases before the National Labor Relations Board. Proposing new protections that would end forced arbitration clauses in employment contracts. This comes in response to Epic Systems versus Lewis decision, and is similar to the approach taken by Representatives Nadler and Scott and Senator Murray in Restoring Justice for Workers Act. Requiring community benefit agreements to ensure that the benefits of new investment and economic development creates broadly shared public value. These have been effective in supporting green building development, making affordable housing available, and providing job training for major programs across the country. Requiring that federally funded construction infrastructure projects sign project labor agreements to ensure fair wages for all jobs. Strengthening prevailing wage laws by extending Davis-Bacon requirements to all federally funded projects, regardless of the source of funds, and to all federal contractors. Career ladderships through apprenticeship and skills training. Ensuring that federal agency resources are coordinated to link the growth of clean energy sectors to investments in job training, job placement, and strong career ladders for professional advancement. This will be led by the Department of Labor and with partnership with the Department of Education. Establishing dedicated programs for green industrial and construction job training and placement under the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, linking apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship training commitments to public investments in clean energy infrastructure using apprenticeship and utilization requirements to ensure that these training programs are backed by strong hiring and retention commitments by employers. Partnering with union experts, the federally funded workforce to providers to create a labor management training and certificate programs that improve worker safety, expand worker scale, and allow for and protect opportunities for workers to join unions. Supporting wages and benefits, creating a federal clean energy wage that averages $25 an hour for skilled workers for clean energy jobs created and supported with federal funds. This rate matches the current rate for skilled trained workers in the field today. Conditioning new federal investments for state, grant, local, and tribal governments on employers offering family-supporting wages and benefits, enforced through project labor agreements, prevailing wage laws, federal overtime requirements, and other strong worker protections. Raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2024, pegged to a median hourly wage thereafter, as well as national paid sick leave. This is a crucial step in raising pay for all workers. Modernizing the nation's overtime rule to protect and adequate compensate for millions of workers who put in more than 40 hours a week and will receive no overtime pay. Pay equity and employer enforcement and transparency. Establishing protections for workers who decide to share salary and benefit information to strengthen their ability to bargain for better pay. Creating strong provisions for compensation, transparency, and worker mobility. Utilizing the Office of Federal Contract Compliance programs to increase enforcement and transparency by requiring companies that apply for federal funds to report their compliance to workplace laws. Prohibiting employers on federally funded projects from trying to persuade workers against joining a union. The decision of whether workers should form a union should be left to workers. Now there is the whole list. Now transition justice and climate justice are things you hear often a lot in the climate movement. So you hear them a lot. You hear them almost as much as you hear the words climate crisis. You hear them pretty frequently. So when people, I want to say that people that are worried about transitioning, activists have your back. So we all have your back. So that's what I want to say. We just realized that this fossil fuel world is not going to continue. It can't continue. It's destroying the planet, and it's going to if it keeps going, it's going to destroy our civilization. So we need to get off it immediately. But we need to do that equitably. We need to do that in a equitable manner, a just manner, and there are ways to do that. So thank you for listening to me ramble on about this topic. Next time I'll be doing housing and buildings. And I'll also probably have another one on Trump and coronavirus as well. Not climate related, but still politically related. And the Green New Deal. I'll do another one I'll just do one on the Green New Deal and just explaining why we should do it. Thanks. See ya. Bye.